And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. How's everybody doing tonight? Guys, you know, something has hit me kind of hard over the past week or two. Candace Owens. You know Candace Owens. She recently got fired from the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro's right-wing conservative organization, neocon, I should say. And she has recently come back, firing guns. I mean, double barrels ablazing, this one here. And listen, I used to know who Candace was a few years back. I used to watch a clip here and there of her on YouTube Shorts or something like that. But I never really followed her all that close until recently, especially after the controversy broke out between her and Ben Shapiro. And I knew she was gravitating toward the Catholic faith. I know I watched a debate between Candace Owens' husband and that one Protestant on YouTube. Who is it? Ali Bucky Stucky, something like that. I forgot what her name is. I don't mean to disrespect her. I just forgot what her name was. And it was interesting because while the two, were debating, the Protestant and her husband, you can see Candace being the moderator. They're being as fair as she could. And then as I'm watching this thing, I'm like, wow, Candace is really about to go Catholic, isn't she? Now, obviously, her husband is Catholic, a devout Catholic, a traditional Catholic. He's made his rounds in a few different, shows, things of that nature. He was on, who was it? Timothy Gordon's Rules for Retrogrades a couple of weeks back, things of that nature. And he's very well spoken on the faith. Seems like a decent fellow. But what's been most remarkable to me, ever since she's come back, it's like she's been unleashed. And the more I watch her now, where she's not under sort of the watchful eye or control of the Daily Wire, she has come out and said, the hell with it. I'm just unleashing everything now, and I'm not holding back. And she's setting the conservative world on fire because she's questioning, again, the basic narrative of this neocon wing that has dominated the party and brought it to its destruction over the past 20 years. I came from that right-wing camp, guys. I mean, when my years of, what do you want to call it, intellectual formation began in the mid-90s, this was before the internet, right? I mean, the internet had been invented, don't get me wrong, but, this is the time we're still reading, magazines like the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol. We're listening to Rush Limbaugh on the radio. Fox News just came out in 96, watching Hannity and Combs debate it back and forth. But with the onset of the internet, something has happened on the political right. And when I left about 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, when I stopped calling myself a conservative, I began to see a lot of fundamental problems on the right. The first of which, and I still make this argument today, is that the right has been co-opted, been bought out by a certain wing, a certain element, whether it's a corporate element or whether it's some other nefarious forces behind the scenes. There's certain people on this platform I can't talk about, let's put it that way. But Candace has come out and is calling it all at this point in time. And it's remarkable to see because I never thought I would see it from sort of a mainstream character. Now, Candace has never been, I don't think at least, anything on a big, huge platform like CNN or MSNBC or whatever you want to call it, Fox, whatever, sort of the old dinosaur media. She's never had anything like that. I think she's been an internet phenomenon since, a few years back. And so I don't know. Again, I didn't follow her that much. But even as a mainstream conservative talking head, to her sort of level, I never thought I would hear some of the things that she is saying from supposed conservatives. And guys, every day she comes across my feed on YouTube, And she's going down the pipe of Catholic integralism at the very least. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, she's questioning everything right now, starting with the World War II narrative, this whole thing going on in Israel, everyday politics in America, where she comes at it from a more nuanced perspective and questioning even right-wing conservative, politics and orthodoxy. Now, a lot of us have kind of seen it in Tucker Carlson in a way, especially ever since he left Fox News, but he was really pushing up against the edge, Tucker, with some of the things he was challenging the right on, especially a lot of the libertarian notions, right? I remember, what was it? There's a few things that libertarians really upset him and conservatives really upset him when there was what was it? Some business, I forgot what it was, a sporting goods store was shutting down in a town, and Tucker was saying, well, wait a minute, all these people are going to lose their jobs. And of course, the libertarian wing, that business aspect of the political right was like, well, hey, that's the economic issue of prosperity. You got winners, you got losers. That's a capitalism. It's the greatest system in the history of the world. And Tucker's like, wait a minute, man. But this entire town depends on this particular business. You're going to ruin lives. And of course, that goes against the orthodoxy of this libertarian wing in conservatism. And it was there that we began to see a split within the political right. Now, the right has been splitting since the onset of Donald Trump. We know that, right? Donald Trump was a rejection of that George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney wing that had pushed conservatives or many conservative-minded people who wanted true conservative values placed on the nation, driven everybody away. And, like I've said so many times, by the year 2013, by the time Barack Obama was reelected, I was done with the Republican Party. I was done with the conservative movement. I was going through my own sort of reversion back to my Catholic faith. And then I began to see the chessboard, right? Because my argument is, I think this is where Candace is kind of coming from, right? The problem is that we Catholics are in a strange place. We are children of two worlds, right? Especially in America. We're born in America, which is a secular liberal republic with its secular liberal values, but we're also Catholic. And Catholicism in and of itself has an entire, other sphere of sort of worldview that we believe in. And for Candace, who's coming along, it looks like to me she's starting to see the complete board. And I would make the argument that in order to see the board, the chessboard, in what has happened throughout not only salvation history, but through the political whims of Western civilization and the impending collapse that we're now about to go through, right? That goes back to the Enlightenment. You have to be able to distinguish the Enlightenment and liberal values from our Catholic faith. Because only through that Catholic faith does that prism or that challenge to liberalism make sense, because the Enlightenment was a rebellion against Catholic civilization. This is why Protestants can't see the entire chessboard. This is why the only thing Protestants have is, we got to get back to the founding principles of America and the Constitution. And you say, but that's gone. That's gone at this point in history. You're appealing to simple, mere ideology because you guys never learned to govern. Catholics have governed at one time. Catholics set up the basic premise of the philosophical foundations of the West. Protestants didn't do that. The Protestants were the rebellion from the church, and they gave us this sort of moral rebellion of the West that gives us modern liberalism today. That's why I say, unless you've gotten a hold of the Catholic faith, you're not going to see the entire chessboard. It's what Tucker is missing. Tucker is right up against the edge of what I would see more of an integralist-minded thinker, right? And when I say integralism, I'm not saying none of us are perfect in that, right? And Tucker won't ever be that. Candace won't ever be perfect. We won't all ever see perfectly how the chessboard lays out. But Tucker has a greater challenge than Candace, and that is Tucker is a Protestant. He's an Anglican. And for that matter, while he's beginning to see the chessboard until he makes the full evolution to the Catholic faith, he will always come up just short while still highlighting and pointing out some of the disparities of the political right and their shortcomings. And he continues to point that out. With Candace making the full evolution to the Catholic faith, she's flat out calling all of this at this point in time. And it's pretty remarkable to watch. I will put some links in the description box. If you guys haven't been getting a hold of Candace's show, she had one actually today where she was interviewed by Don Lemon, right? Don Lemon, former CNN host. He's part of that particular disordered community over there. And she was on to go discuss politics. And it was one of those things that happens to conservatives all the time when they go on shows governed or run by progressives. And it was a setup to try and ambush her with a bunch of cheap shots. And boy, she was great, man. And she was just firing back left and right. They talked about the issue of, the disordered life, I'll put it that way. And she held to her guns. But the one thing they did bring up, which was fascinating, was the persecution of disordered people. Was it disordered people? No. Sorry. It was a persecution of Jews and the history of the persecution of Jews. And Candace has been getting tired of this. Not that she denies that Jews have been persecuted, but how the rest of the world ignores how actually Christians are the most persecuted people in the history of the world. This is something that I've pointed out on this show now, for a long time, the years I've been doing this podcast. Now, of course, I'm a small fry. I'm a nobody. I get that, right? But it's been one of my frustrating points over the years where we sit back and everybody plays the victims, all the while it's the Christians that are being attacked everywhere all over the world, and nobody seems to care. And yet we're supposed to be made to feel guilt if we don't care about other groups that are oppressed, right? Now, as Christians, we should care about everybody, obviously, and we do. But every once in a while, you got to give some reciprocal love back. And Christians have never gotten that historically. Because when you look at the events, the history, and the actual numbers, who has been more persecuted than Christians? Who? Right? The Armenian genocide, the Vendée in France, the Protestant persecution of the Catholics in Ireland, the Cristeros in Mexico. I mean, go down the historical list. Look what the communists did to Catholics and Orthodox during the Bolshevik Revolution. Tens of thousands of priests and nuns murdered, 24,000 churches destroyed in the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc. That's all whitewashed from history. But a particular event that happened in Germany in the 1940s, we hear about that every 5 minutes. Now, I don't want to downplay or discount or what do you want to say? Ignore what happened in Germany in the 1940s. Don't get me wrong. But like I said, a little reciprocal love back for Christians that have been persecuted. But see, that doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the narrative of the liberal world, and it doesn't fit the narrative, not only of progressives, it doesn't fit the narrative of right-wing conservatives that are in that neocon camp. That's the irony of it all. And it was interesting watching Candace go to work, because at one point when she mentioned the fact that Christians are the most persecuted people in the history of the world, Don Lemon laughed at her, right? Laughed in her face. And, she got so angry over that she fired back. Now, on her cast, doing sort of the running back through the show, she apologized because she kind of felt like she was over the top in her response when Don Lemon laughed at her. And I watched the clip. I don't think she was over the top. She was mad, but her tone was absolutely perfect as she shot back when Don Lemon laughed at the idea that Christians are the most persecuted group in the history of the world. See, Don Lemon's point is that, well, he works with a certain group of people, and when Candace downplays or when Christians downplays that event that happened in Germany in the 1940s, that hurts these particular people's sensibilities. And Candace's point is, well, fine, but why does anybody care about the Christians when Christians are being persecuted? And as Candace fired back, she says, basically her point was, listen, you can laugh in my face when I say Christians are the most persecuted people on the face of the planet. But if you made the argument that this other group of people, right, is the most persecuted group of people in the history of the world, and I laughed in your face, you would call me a bigot. You see how the double standard works here? Christians who actually have been persecuted are the most persecuted group in the history of the world. We get laughed at when we mention our persecutions. But when other people claim or take a proclamation of authority in their people's persecution, well, now we become bigots if we laugh in their face, right? We don't laugh in their face. We've never laughed in their face, even though we've had questions about certain things that have happened throughout history. And of course, we're not allowed to ask any questions when it comes to certain events historically. And this is where the political right always winds up aiding the left. This is why conservatives become the enablers of communism in the West. And they keep the facade going. Because for all the talk of freedom, liberty, free speech, conservatives are the first to cower down when certain topics come up. And Candace is taking on all these different topics. One thing she's talking about is the assassination of JFK. That's become a very uncomfortable topic recently in the mainstream. What else is there? There's been a few of them. She's asking questions about 9/11, right? When I was in the conservative camp, 9/11, that you couldn't question that one, right? That makes you a nut job and a quack, and why do you hate your government so much? That kind of stuff. But she's asking questions because we're at a point in history, and I don't know anything about 9/11. Listen, guys, I remember that day. I'm not questioning the narrative we've been given. But my point is, conservatives, those that believe in the bastion of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, kiss my ass. You can't tell me what to do. I'm an American. They are the first ones, the very first ones to cower down when a conspiracy theory is thrown out. A conspiracy theory that has a certain weight of public shame to it. It is the conservatives that are the first and the biggest cowards. And I know this because I was a conservative. I was there. I remember seeing the cowardice of the conservatives. I remember the conservatives caving in on the abortion issue. I remember conservatives caving in on the disordered life. I remember all these things. And you dare not cross a certain line when it comes to certain issues, right? Because the political right would gladly take a certain amount of censorship in order to protect their status quo. But of course, the problem is, and that the right has is that when you talk about the big major talking heads, right? Talk radio show hosts, lots of the pundits in the mainstream media, with the book writers, the philosophers, many of them, in my opinion, and I'm speculating here, and I do have kind of a good idea because I was in that world, but many of them are bought and paid for by the conservative orthodoxy of big conservative incorporated, right? It's an industry. The problem is these guys are all making millions upon millions of dollars. We don't know who pays them. Right there would tell you the economic engine of prosperity, right? I got a product and a good and a service that I sell and people pay for it. Bull crap. Bull crap. There is a certain element of influence behind the political right that raises and elevates certain individuals. The left does this too, don't get me wrong, but the right doesn't. And there is an orthodoxy on the right that you cannot cross at the end of the day. This is what Candace did at Daily Wire. She was not allowed to cross the orthodoxy of this neocon ideology, and she did, and she lost her job because of that. This is why, for me, I think we have to, as Catholics, be free and independent to express our opinions. When we are funded by others who don't share our faith, it becomes a problem. Now, I know we have the likes of Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh over at the Daily Wire. And listen, I like those guys. Don't get me wrong. Generally, they're pretty good. They seem like faithful Catholics, and they fight the good fight, right? They, things of all that nature. But Catholics need to be independent. And we've been poor at it, right? We've never been able to establish the institutions. And that's because, as Catholics historically, we were always an agrarian people, right? An agrarian people that had large families. We practiced our faith, and life was very simple to us. We were not part of the upper classes or the merchant class, which was more invested in sort of this usury business cycle. And in the world where it takes money in order for you to grow and get exposure and things of that nature, Catholics, I think, have failed in general. Obviously, there's been some Catholics that have succeeded, but in general, I think Catholics have been disadvantaged because our faith demands so much of us. Our faith is not fluid. Our faith is not subjective. It's very objective, unlike other groups, like Protestants, right? And other groups of people where their faith is more subjective. They can fudge the rules, and therefore fudging the rules in their circumstances allows them more social, financial, and economic fluidity, where we Catholics are kind of stuck at times. We can work with it, don't get me wrong, but we've never been a cutthroat people, generally speaking. Again, we got bad Catholics all over the place, right? And I think this is the point. This is the point. Listen, she has been going through a lot of these issues, and it's very brave. It's very courageous. I'm not sure if she keeps going down this path, if she isn't taken out at some point. I hate to say that, but she's really challenged the status quo. And I think the political right in America is at a crossroads. Donald Trump kind of exposed that, though I think Donald Trump is compromised. Don't get me wrong, right? What choice do we have in November other than to pull the lever for Trump at the end of the day, unless you want 4 more years of this absolute madness and destruction of America, right? But Trump, like every other Republican in power, won't do much to change a broken system. All he can do is slow it down a little bit for 4 years. But the political right is at a crossroads. I predict that if the next Republican nominee after Donald Trump is another typical neocon, there's going to be a split. People are done being lied to. They're done of the big money influence that buys out the political rights. They can try and use, again, the influence of talk radio and Fox News as much as they want. But the internet provides too much information now for people to just ignore. And people are going to the platforms that they're choosing. More and more people are just eliminating cable TV from their lives anyways. I canceled my cable, my satellite TV 5-6 years ago. I don't even watch Fox News anymore. Never mind CNN and MSNBC. I may see a few clips here and there on YouTube, but people are running away from this stuff. The political right is, or at least those good and decent Americans that know that something is wrong, and where the political elites have failed to address the concerns of everyday average Americans. This is all being revealed. And in many ways, this is what Candace is touching on. And I think the bottom line is this, right? What we have right now in America that's so discouraging and frustrating is that we don't feel like the politicians in DC are here to take care of us or to defend us or to represent us at this point in history. That there has been a cabal that has risen to power, right? to use again, a parallel, I guess, from the Hunger Games, the Capitol, right? The Capitol, they're living good, large, very prosperous lives, while the other 11 districts we're all kind of been left on our own to fend for ourselves, sort of scrounge for the scraps. And there's many of us looking at the Capitol and saying, you guys have lost your mind over there. You guys have lost your mind. You don't help us anymore. You don't represent us anymore. And, every time I hear, things like, well, the deficit is out of control. The deficit is out of control. And it is out of control. I've learned to equate all the deficit spending that has given us this inflation as simply saying to me, the Treasury is being raided by the politicians. Because that's what it effectively is. The Treasury is being raided by special interests right now. And the American people, those of us that are paying in the inflation rates at the grocery stores, gas, housing, we're the ones providing what's in the Treasury that's being stolen from us. There's problems right now in America. Liberalism is collapsing in real time. And there's no election that's coming to save us. I'm sorry, I hate to say that. And I think this is one of the things that Candace is touching on. It's just that Candace is going deeper, right? Your average everyday left and right politics, it doesn't explain it anymore. And with the onset of the internet, people can look up information. It's all being broken down. Listen, I was never, an Alex Jones fan. That wasn't me. But what's the saying now? The difference between a conspiracy is 6 months, right? Every conspiracy, well, I don't say every conspiracy, but so many conspiracies that 10, 15, 20 years ago we laughed off, they're all being proven right, or many of them at least are being proven right every 6 months right now. And average everyday Americans that are struggling to feed their families, pay their mortgage, pay their rents, being taxed to death, are saying, enough of this. Enough of this. Now, where does this go at the end of the day? I don't know. But people are tired of it. Candace goes deeper though. And Candace exposes not just the left, which is corrupt, but the right itself, which are the enablers of the left. They are enablers of communism. The right has never been able to fight off communism. Right? This is the inherent weakness of classical liberalism that, I know the right tries to differentiate. Well, there's a difference between liberalism and communism. Yes, there's a difference, but liberalism is still the foot in the door, right? It's the foot in the door. And this is why every liberal republic since the Enlightenment has fallen and now looks like some kind of quasi-communist nation at this point in history. And America is no different. I know we like to say, well, our Constitution is special, right? We had our demigods, founding fathers, and they gave us something equivalent to the Holy Scripture in the Constitution, right? And ours is better structured than Australia and Canada. Okay, fine. Maybe it has a few more loopholes that the politicians have to jump through, but look at it. They've been able to manage. They've been able to manage. You can say, well, Frank, we got to get back to subsidiarity. And I agree with you. But we're not there. We're not there. That same government that we've tried to govern with this one particular legal document, they've taken subsidiarity away, and they're not giving it back to us. It's not happening. See, this is my problem with conservatives. They don't know how to govern. They've never known how to govern, and all they can do is scream ideological phrases. Ideological principles. We got to get back to the founding principles and the founding fathers of America. Yes, but you got to govern. And you've never governed. You've never been able to govern. And simply saying, we got to vote harder, get back to the Constitution and the founding fathers is not an answer when the Capitol controls everything now. Candace, Tucker, I think they've seen the light to a certain degree. Candace more than Tucker. Tucker isn't far away. But I got to tell you, man, Candace has been on fire. She's a joy to watch. There's a lot of issues out there that she keeps bringing up that I just, honestly, I don't mean to brag, guys, but she sounds like me a lot of times. Maybe that's why I'm impressed, right? I hear myself and her a lot of times, a lot of concerns. Her thing about questioning the World War II narrative is quite remarkable to me because, I brought up a lot of these issues and we're not allowed to question a lot of these narratives. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Candace Owens, she's on fire, man. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This is Frank signing off for Frank is Speaking. Good night, everybody.